How's it going, YouTube? Coaching today with another video, and today, guys, what I'm bringing to you is how to counter the meta. Now, this meta has been all over the place, and you've seen different decks, even cards like Droplet just go from being the best card to the worst card to being pretty okay to being really good, back down to bad. And it's just because this format has really taken so long to be figured out. And I know some people are like, oh, the format's already figured out, we already know what's going on. But I don't really feel like that's true. I feel like there's a lot of cards that have been overlooked as being really easy answers to the meta right now, and I'm going to be going over that with you today because with all the regionals, the YCSs coming up, there's a lot to cover, and there's still a lot of really nice avenues that you can take for your sideboard and even really nice main deck choices to really answer the meta for what's going on right now. So I really do hope this video helps as usual. This is going to have a part 2 as well, as we're only covering about 4 decks today, but I feel like they're going to be the most prominent for you, so I want to make sure that I cover these first, and then we'll go over some other ones in a different video later down the road. Another big announcement, like I said before though, is the GGYGO mat is finally coming to fruition. With Midnight Dream's help and being sold off of Imperium, I really am just confident that you're going to love this mat. It's so beautiful, and it's really just a work of art down to the very core of it. I'm so happy to be working with Midnight again. This is just such a beautiful mat, and I can't wait to show it off to you all. It's going to be another week or so before I'm able to show it, but it's going to be something special, and I really do hope that you enjoy that. I know I'm going to be rocking it whenever I have it. It's going to come out as cloth too, and you guys know that I only play on cloth, so I only want you to be able to have the same experience as I do. So that's how it's going to be sold. I will be selling it as a 1-player and a 2-player with zones and without. So I do hope that you're excited for that because it's going to be such a wonderful time. Now, without further ado, let's hop right into the content today about how to counter this meta that seems ever so daunting, because there's so many different ways that you can go about this meta, so many different builds that people are playing, but we're going to be covering all that today and some more. So the first thing that I want to cover today is going to be Fluentaries. And now I wanted to just go straight to this real fast because I want to just note something, that when you're playing Ghost Ogre and Droll against Fluentaries, it's just some of the best utility that you can use against the deck. The only thing that you have to keep in mind is for the chance that they open D-Shifter, your Ogre and your Droll can't be sent to the graveyard to activate because of D-Shifter being in play. So you just want to make sure that you are playing cards that are going to be proactive against them. Yes, you also have to put them on while you have to have Dimension Shifter if I have Droll, which is usually fine, but it's still something where if you're in a really intense Game 3 situation and you don't want to risk it, just keep this in the back of your mind that if they have D-Shifter, these cards are just not going to work for you. But I do want to go ahead and go back into the list here and just kind of talk about what the average list looks like. Big shout outs to Henko though for going to the YCS and getting top 4 with this list. He's a very, very talented player. The only card that I changed in the extra deck that I couldn't find, there was a Synchro. I put in the Paleo instead. But I did want to mention this too. I think this is really cool because if you actually send this card from your extra deck to the graveyard, if you are on like a Nadir Servant package or what have you, if any of your back row is going to be blown up, like if it's set, like your Dreaming Town, you can just banish that card from your grave instead, and I just think that it's a really nice card to have. But the deck itself, we still see the 3 Advent and the 3 Book of Moon. You just want as many ways as possible to be able to dodge Imperm. I think this is really nice too, because even when I was theorying the deck I still thought that the 3 Book of Moon was going to be necessary, and it's just because if you have multiple ways to answer a card that's your biggest problem, why not just play those? So when it comes to Fluentaries, the number one thing that you have to keep in the back of your mind is that once their engine gets going, it's going to keep going and keep going. Even if you open up like the Twin for the map in the Dreaming Town, it still gets really daunting when they have so much gas. So you really have to make sure that when you are going against the deck, you're putting in cards that not only shut them down for 1 turn, but it could shut them down for multiple turns. So what do I mean by that? So let's go over here and talk about 2 of them. One is going to be multiple turns, one will just be that 1 turn, but still very effective for multiple turns on end, and we'll talk about why that is too. I want to start off with There Can Be Only One. So the theory behind There Can Be Only One in Floodgates right now is the same reason why we don't see Eldritch in the format right now. Outside of like Cyber's Eldritch, which is here and there, you don't see like 3 skill drain the deck because Dracoback exists, and a lot of people are very afraid to play that deck right now. There's also a lot of people main decking things like Cosmic because of of Scythe. But we've actually started seeing the Cosmic starting to come out of the main deck. The only thing that we're seeing a lot of now is going to be the Draco back. And that's a really important key note, and we're going to talk about that in just a couple minutes, about why the lesser main deck spell and trap removal we see, the more crazy other cards get. So there can be only one, as long as you keep in your mind that if they have a Draco back, I'm not saying Fluentaries will, but this is like the overall thought process of Floodgates right now, is nobody wants to play them because of Draco back. But it's the same thing as answering a whole board with 2 hand traps, right? If you have there can be only one, as long as you have something to answer the Draco back with, or the token when it gets attached, then there can be only one is so free, and it wins you so many matches, especially going against Fluentaries. Even if you're going second, I would still keep there can be only one in your main deck, because if you can just set it and just deny them those extra turns with you, a lot of times that's just a very free win. That's something that I feel like a lot of people have just kind of like dropped, but I really feel like there can be only one is going to come back in the meta very, very hard right now, because it's something that just really shuts off a lot of decks currently, especially Fluentaries. Now, the reason I like Lancia against this matchup the same way that I like there can be only one is because the cards go to the graveyard, and unless they have like Stree to keep recycling them back to their banish zone and getting them back, it's really tough for them to keep grinding with you because they don't have all of their birds. That's the number one problem you see against Fluentaries, is when they can keep adding them back and they can keep chain blocking your Ash. There's a lot of different things that are big issues against that deck, and this is one thing that I think is very, very nice to keep in the back of your mind as well, is that Lancia is just one of the best answers to that deck, also because it's very generic right now. So moving forward off of that, since Advent is in the game right now and it can be very daunting to play against, one thing, even against like Book of Moon, right, is Gamma. I think that if you have the opportunity to play Gamma, I'm even thinking about siding Gamma and Striker right now. It's just one thing that is so strong because it just can't be dodged by like an Advent or like a Book of Moon, right? So like against Flu, I think this card is just great because you don't really have to worry about too much. Like if they have map, then yeah, they can extend. But if they don't have map and they're just going to go ahead Gamma them, even if they have Advent, it doesn't matter because they can't keep summoning without the extra map there, right? Granted, they can go ahead and search the map there, but this is still a really nice option because usually whenever you're going against Fluentaries, you already know that you're hitting the Eglin. To put them on, you have to have a starter. And as we've all seen too, is that like if you don't have the search for the tribute summon, a lot of people are only on 1 Empin right now. So it gets really, really tough when you just have to put them on like, did you open it? Because a lot of times they just don't at that point, right? Yes, they play like the pot cards, but when they're only playing 1 Empin now, the odds is they actually see it are pretty low. So that's why I still like hitting the Eglin with Gamma. Yes, there's other situations where you can like wait for the Empin as well, which is equally fine. But these are just some really nice interactions to think about when you're playing against Fluentaries in this meta. The next thing I want to bring up. So, Based. A lot of people don't know what Based is, and that's okay. This is still like relatively new, and it's become more mainstream now. So essentially like the biggest end board that you're going to see off of them is going to be like Herald, Baron, and like Boral Savage. This is a pretty common end board for them. It gets pretty big. So what we're talking about when we mean Based, we basically are saying the 60 card, the Souls, the Brave, a ton of hand traps, Scythe, the Dragon package, like you got it all here. And this is something where you have to really think about when you're playing against a deck, like how many hand traps could they have possibly opened in a 5-card hand when it's 60 cards? How many utility cards do they have in the deck? Like if they opened 1 engine, how many more engines do I have to play through here? So these are just kind of questions you have to ask yourself whenever trying to hand trap the deck. Usually it gets kind of hard though, for a couple of reasons here. So the Red Rose Dragon, which is right here on the screen, this, as long as you just normal summon it and then you free summon like a Griffin from your hand, or you like special of a shooter, right, because it's already a 7, this is where you can just immediately go into Baron, and then the Red Rose will summon the Rox Rose, then the Rox Rose will add the Basil Rose Shot, and then the Rose Shot will then go ahead and reborn this to go into Hulk. So This is what we mean when we talk about you need 2 hand traps to answer this board, because they're almost always going to be able to just start off with that Baron. They're also on Small World because quite a few things in this deck bridge to get to the Red Rose. So you have to really be just aware of that. There is a lot of room for utility here. They're also on Fusion Destiny. They have Hoppier Squadron. If you're not sure what this card does, they can add it off of Cupid Pitch when it's synchroed away, and then the Hoppier can go ahead on your opponent's turn, special itself from your hand, and then use one of your monsters as synchro material, and then go ahead and sync. So a lot of times you'll see some lists playing like double Baron, and so they'll make like the Boral Savage after they like return their Baron, right? And what's really cool too is like if you're in a grind game, you can like return Baron, and then you can special summon the Ogre, and then you can go ahead and Hoppier, and then use your Boral Savage after you negate with the Hoppier, and then make another Baron. So it's pretty nice, and you have a lot of utility here. They're also on Droplet, and they can play like a ton of hand traps. So this is just a pretty deadly deck all around, right? But there are some pretty nice answers to it, though, that I want to go over. So the first thing is I really do recommend right now, if you have the space, sideboard triple Dark Ruler, triple Regeki. This is something where it's really strong because most decks right now are ending on monster-heavy boards. And this is something that Dark Ruler became insane this format because there's not a lot of answers to it. If you're playing against like Dragon, it's so-so, but at the same time, it's a lot better now because most people cut the Chamber Tiding package, so it makes this even better. You'll learn that once all the big board breakers left everyone's deck, cards like this and another one I'm going to show here in a minute got just absurd. They're so good right now, especially against Based. Being able to just Dark Ruler their board, they don't have a lot of protection through this. So having cards like Dark Ruler and Regeki just answer the entire board, and then you don't have to worry about hand trapping them twice. You just let them establish the board and then just wipe it. So this is something that I highly recommend going forward because this is very, very strong. Moving forward off of that though, don't use Droplet against Based. They end at Herald the Arclight. You cannot send cards from your hand, so you have to commit cards to your field, and that's just something that is not really that optimal. It makes Droplet feel very bad. Just would not recommend running Droplet, so just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. If any deck ends on Herald, you just don't want to use Droplet. That should be immediately out of your deck, and that's another reason why like Dark Ruler just becomes so strong, right? So, Mystic Mine. Let's have a talk about this, all right? Based will run through their Dracoback when they're comboing. If they keep it in their hand, just know you need an answer for that. But a lot of times they pitch it when they're comboing. The other thing is that Dragon cut Chamber Tiding. So like mine's kind of free right now. We're going back to the format where like nobody cares about back row out. So at this point, since everyone's main decking a ton of hand traps, there's not a lot of things that Dragon and Base can do against mine currently. If they're on Chamber Tiding, then just be aware. You should probably set out your mind. But there's a lot of builds right now that just really don't care about it, which is pretty interesting. And we've been seeing that quite a bit. So I would keep that also just kind of in mind whenever you're going against those matchups, that mine could really just be a free win. So when we talk about Dragon Link, right, this is something that I wanted to bring up because this is like a standard list right as of right now, where they're playing a decent amount of hand traps. They're playing like their zombie vampire, but there's only one seal now, which is really interesting. This went from 2 to 1 very quick. And so this is something where they had to make room in their extra deck for the Sanafond, for things like zombie vampire. A lot of people prefer playing Axes and Boral Swords, so there's just not a lot of room for everything that you want to do, right? So we've been seeing a lot of just one seal right now. So that's actually really important to note, because once that first one's gone, it's really tough for them to really be able to put up a solid board presence again, because like they can put up like a Savage or like a Hot Red, but that's no more than like the average negate out of a deck, right? So like to me, I feel like that's a lot easier to deal with rather than a bounce and then a free flow, right? So the other thing that I want to mention here too is that against this deck, do not kill the Dark Charmer. I know that it's not in here right now, but the Dark Charmer should be over the Triple Burst. That's just personal preference, but you should have a Dark Charmer somewhere in your extra deck. But the Dark Charmer can search the Levianeer as well, so that gets pretty scary. That's something that I learned the hard way, so you guys don't have to, you know. But so with Dragon Link, specifically against their follow-up, if you have the ability to crack their board, Lancia on their follow-up just makes it to where they cannot play the game. If they keep the extra Collapse Serpent in their hand from when they get it back off the Chaos Space, because they shuffle it back and then get it to their hand, to use as an extender on the follow-up turn, they'll have like Galactic Spiral in their graveyard, which is like okay at best for an extender there, but they'll also have like the Chaotic Ruler and what have you just chilling in the grave, because they have a lot of ways that they can come back into the game. But if you go ahead and Lancia them just specifically on their follow-up, there's not a whole lot that they can do. And this is really important, because this is easily just a free win against the Dragon Link deck that a lot of people, they will drop the Lancia early, and there's nothing wrong with that. But like, if your deck can kind of battle through a board and crack it, and then on like any interruption at all, and then you have a Lancia in hand, it should just be a free win from there. Unless their hand's like absolutely absurd, cracking that board and lancing them is just game. So the next thing that I want to pop into here, though, is that, again, specifically against Dragon, I really like Triple Tactics Talent. I feel like this card just does wonders, especially when I'm playing Striker. Nothing feels better than activating multiple setting talents, multiple target talents, hot red negate, and then you flip talents. Like, it's so crazy. It's so good. It's just, against Dragon, just the ability to go ahead and steal is really nice, because especially cards like the Boral Savage, or if you have cards like Hot Red, both of them say you can only use the effect of this card once per turn. So like, if your opponent used a negate on it and then you get it, you can also negate with it, because it's you can only use it, affects the player. So I really like tactics against this matchup, and it's just a very threatening card against them. So highly recommend that as well. The next thing, I think this is really underrated, honestly. I think that a lot of people just have overlooked Super Poly this format. I know it's going to be really big with Despia when we get that all in April. But as of right now, Predaplant Dragostapelia, currently, when you just fuse a Dark and a Fusion, is insane. Because if you're playing against like PK, right, you fuse their Rusty and their DPE, and then you make Dragostapelia, and then you target their Griffin, and they force a Fog Blade, which is pretty insane. So you bait 3 interactions with 1 card. So I think that's really nuts too, because once you get rid of the Rusty as well, they're forced to like try to bring it back, and then they can't even use their Fog Blade on like the Break Sword in their grave to go ahead and get a free pop. And so like, you don't even have to worry about the Scythe Lock at all at that point. Like, it's just a free game. So I think Super Poly is just nuts, specifically with Dragostapelia. I think that card's insane, and it's just really underused right now. So I want to talk about Invoke Shaddoll Dogmatic as well, because this is a deck that kind of pops its head in and out of the format. So with Bell, this card is so good, right? It stops your invocation. It stops the Not Your Servant. If they're on the Ariel, it stops that as well. If they activate like Schism on the flip of it, then you can go ahead and use the Bell as well, and then send it to the graveyard, which is really nice. Even if you're just negating the effect later on, it's still really okay. You can stop the Op Clone in the graveyard, because it adds from deck or grave to hand. There's a lot of very good opportunity to go ahead and use Bell. It's basically just like the best thing that you can have against this matchup. So that's why it typically never leaves my sideboard at 2, because it has generic uses throughout the entire format, and also it's just very good against this deck. And this is something that I at least expect to play against like 2 of these a tournament. So this is why I always just recommend having a Bell somewhere, because it's still very useful, this format. Whether or not you're hitting like Deskbot 0-1, should go ahead and stop like the Auroradon combo, or if you're like using it to like stop the bring back of Scythe or DPE, it just has so many good uses right now, even against the Aquamancer. But there is something else though here, and that's, I feel like a lot of people don't really know this, but so whenever they're going to use Invocation, if you chain any Crow-like effect, like Shark Cannon, Crow, whatever you have, right, to the Alistair that's in the graveyard, even like chaining Haquero, right? This is so deadly because unless they have an Alistair in their hand, they don't get their fusion, and it's just a free game from there, you know? Like, they have some things that they can still do, but they essentially just leave themselves pretty open. So this is something that I really enjoy doing. It just definitely gets to a point where you can either... So there's two ways to think about this too, right? You can crow the Alistair out beforehand, before they use the invocation, and not let them put it in the graveyard so they can't like recycle for the next turn. Or you can just chain it to the invocation, and then if you have like a stop for the Alistair as well, then you can just go ahead and save that for the follow-up turn. But for me, I always just kind of like to draw cards out of the hand so I know exactly how many are left as well. So that's why I like just chaining it to the invocation, but that's totally up to you and how you want to go about that. But going ahead and stopping this fusion summon here is just really nice because, again, it leaves them pretty open. So it's something that you should really consider whenever you're going into that matchup. So another thing too is that if you ever have open room in your extra deck, right? If you're playing like Fluentaries, like Kenko did, if you're playing like Guru or like whatever deck has just like a really open extra deck right now, right? You should really consider running the Christmas package. And if you're not familiar with what this is, you play 3 cards. You play Makaba, Nova, and Natis. And then if you play these cards together, if your opponent hits you with Maximus, then you go and send Nova and Natis, and then you pop a card they control, and since Nova in your possession, even though it's sent from your extra deck to the graveyard, since it was sent there by your opponent's card, you can then go ahead and special Makaba from your extra deck. So it's a really nice free monster, spell, trap, negate, and then a free pop. So it's the Christmas package, as I give you a present. I think this is hilarious. It's been in the game for a long time, but it's still really funny when it goes off. So just never forget to do this if you're ever against the deck and you're like knowing it's going to be there. This is just really free advantage to go ahead and win that game. The next thing, though, is Source Tenny. Another deck that I want to talk about. The Mystic Mind is absolutely dumpsters right now. And the reason being is, like, they cut Circle from the deck. You know, like, they cut the cards, like, the Lightning Storms and whatnot, when they're just playing, like, Hard Go Second or what have you. Like, all these cards that would just play around Mystic Mind are just gone. Because, like, they have Blackout, but, like, if you only activate Mind, like, that card doesn't do anything. So I really like this a lot, too, because, like, you know, it's big monster combo heavy. But the second that Mind hits the board, it's pretty GG in the chat. So this is something that I really enjoy as well, just because, you know, they're doing like the big Halcdon combo. This is another thing too where I was mentioning about like the Bell and the Despot 001. Very, very strong, and it's just really underrated. A lot of people just get really caught off guard by this too, because it is just so random, right? But it is a very nice negate to happen because a lot of times they just can't really do a whole lot after that because they're really reliant on making that Yazi play and getting back to like their Taie and what have you. So very, very nice. Again, also, there can be only one. Very nice card, just a free win against Sword Soul most times, especially if you're just, you know, you're going first. They, like, reveal special Vishuda, and you flip there can be only one. They're like, oh, you know, unless they have, like, the Red Rose to go behind it, like, it's pretty much just over from there. So I really like this card a lot. I think it's going to come back in the meta very quickly. But I do hope that you enjoyed this video today. This was one that I wanted to make because I feel like there's so many changes that are going on in the meta that I just really want to keep everyone informed, because when you're just in a forever changing format, there's just so many things to keep track of, and it's just better to have it all in one nice video. So I do hope that you all enjoyed the video today, though. If you do want a coaching session, definitely go over to my Metafy page. In the description, we'll have all the links, and you can go ahead and find your good one-on-one session. And if you want a different kind of session, feel free to PM me as well. We can talk about how we can customize that to you. So I hope that everyone has a wonderful night, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Thank you.